You can't replace part of the brain. Like, you
treat them the same.
A source of truth for the medtech industry.
Coexists with the province.
Robot understands things automatically.
Number one show in the medtech industry.
So Stryker got ahead of that and changed in the 90s, built $1 billion company that held up high, a lot of things.
State of MedTech with your host, Omar and Khatib. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. One of the more exciting areas of medicine, of course, there's a lot of exciting areas of medicine, but I think it's around heart health and interventional cardiology. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Nabil Dib, who's an interventional cardiologist, an innovator, and the president of the International Society for Cardiovascular Translational Research. Dr. Dib, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Fantastic. Well, look, as a former medical student, as a son of a surgeon, we can't talk about anything before we first talk about, your background and training. So maybe if you can give the audience a little bit about your background, your training, and how you ended up in this wonderful world of interventional cardiology.
Yeah, it is a very exciting journey. I was trained as a physician. I graduated from Damascus University. And after that, I did extensive training in internal medicine in Boston University and Tufts University, general cardiology in Wisconsin University in Milwaukee, interventional cardiology in Beth Israel Deaconess, one of hospital of Harvard. And then after that, I did investigational devices training in Harvard also. After that, I went to do I get epidemiology degree in clinical trial design and effectiveness from Harvard School of Public Health.
That's fantastic, and that's quite a broad range of training. Especially, you don't meet too many physicians who also decide to get trained in epidemiology. So, why did you decide to take all these routes? What earlier in your career, why were you interested in doing all of this? Because it's a lot of work and a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it is
especially epidemiology.
Yeah, it is unusual. But after I did my training in interventional cardiology, and I was in a place in Beth Israel Deaconess where my mentors, Dr. Baim was the world-renowned interventional cardiologist in Harvard, and he was involved in many of the innovation and the new technology that many of it today we use for patients. I found that is very exciting opportunity. So I asked him if I can do training specifically on interventional devices, and I did. And then after all that training, I asked him well, I still don't understand really how do they generate the science and the data. He said, if you want to understand data and how to generate the information related to the innovation, you have to go to Harvard School of Public Health. And there is a specific degree in epidemiology on a clinical trial design and effectiveness, and cost effectiveness also. So you need to go there. So I went there and I completed that of training. And I thought at that time, I am fully prepared. I am 39 years old, and fully prepared to do anything. And I came here to Arizona Heart Institute. There's a famous cardiac surgeon trained with Dr. DeBakey in Houston, and he loved innovation. And when he heard about me, he called me and he said, "Jim, come join me here. We do a lot of innovation, and I'm very interested in what you're trying to do." So I came to Arizona Heart Institute, and I thought I will do everything. And I was trained on three-dimensional technology. I was developing three-dimensional technology. I was also exposed in Tufts to a very famous cardiologist, his name Jeffrey Isner, who was the world renowned in genetics. So then between my training in catheter technology and gene and cell, there was a lot of science about cellular therapy. My stem cell might become very important. I said, I can do the first stem cell transplant in the United States. So I brought the scientist of stem cell therapy from Boston and Duke University, and I told them I can deliver everything with the three-dimensional technology that I was developing with J&J. So when we want to go to first in man, I was giving lectures in Washington, D.C. And then after the lectures, one of the audience came and he said, "Dr. Dib, did you say you were going to do first stem cell transplant in the United States?" And I said, "Yes, we're doing it in 1 month from now." And he said, oh, that would require a specific application, specific testing and regulation requirements, to pass evaluation of preclinical and the clinical models, and very extensive process. Then I was surprised. I thought I was trained on everything. How is that I'm not exposed to that kind of training? And then I say, okay, then let's work together and see. We'll do everything you ask me to do in terms of regulatory. And then I start to understand the regulatory science and how is that embedded into the innovation. How important is that? People say, oh, the FDA is hurdle or something, but reality, this is a regulatory science that need to be taught. There is no hurdle because that's so important later on in terms of safety of patient and the efficacy of therapy. So then I realized, oh, that's with all my education, there's something missing. There's another education that's missing. How do I integrate the regulatory part into it? How do I take a concept and see if I can be, tested in animal or preclinical testing, whether vitro or animal testing, and how can I translate that to the human? And what's the methods and endpoint, and what do I need to collect and so forth? I realize there's a whole science is required in our educational system, significant gap in our educational system that leading to a major issues later on, which is now it take us on average 15 years to develop medical product. And if we are developing a drug, take about $2.3 billion to develop a drug, and devices approximately $1 billion if it's a breakthrough therapy like the TAVR and so forth. So then there's many components why there's delay and cost, but the major one is the education on the innovation process and the innovation ecosystem. So I met with the FDA and CMS and other people, and then we said we require additional education in our system. We are, as doctors and engineers, regulators, reimbursement agency personnel, we have to standardize the system and have one system in one place. And they said, well, that's very ambitious goal. So, but of course, everything important is not easy. So we put together the mind of the people and the expert in the field, including the FDA, the CMS, industry leaders, innovators in the field. We get all those people together, and we founded the Society of the Translational Research, the Cardiovascular, the ISCTR, the International Society for Cardiovascular Translational Research, in 2007, and founded with it a journal of Cardiovascular Translational Research, sponsored and published by Nature Springer, which is one of the largest publishing company in the world, to disseminate the science. And we put all our effort together, and as a result, we now have online course of 80 lectures on cardiovascular innovation, and we have 36 lectures on the general device medical product innovation. We have an ebook of 400 pages and 36 lectures embedded in it. And now we start disseminate that science in university. We have Purdue University, NYU University adapted the program, InMed in Texas, University of Arizona, and so forth. So our goal to expand that standardized education on the innovation, on medical product innovation, to many universities worldwide. And what does that do? That will expedite the therapy to patient, to bring the therapy earlier to save life and improve the quality of life, and also decrease the cost. So that knowledge of the alphabet, of the translational medicine, is a critical language for communication and expedite the product to patient. And we think we will make a major difference and revolution in our educational system.
That's fantastic, and what a story! And what I love about this is that this is a sort of a story of discovery in terms of the gaps of knowledge that exist. I kind of want to go back and just ask you, because again, my father, very much like you, trained overseas and came to the U.S. If you can touch on it for a little bit, what was your life like in Syria, and what was it like for you as a foreign graduate to come to the U.S.? I think you came to the U.S. probably around the same time as my father, and so you were able to have like this great success story. And again, what I like to call it's the true American success story. What was life like in Syria, and that I guess that translation over into the U.S.?
Yeah, I summarized this story when one time I was asked a kind of similar question, actually during citizenship, and I summarized that story. I said, when I arrived the United States, I felt I have arrived the land of freedom and opportunity. And because of the opportunity, I studied literally on a candle and graduated from Harvard Medical School. When I arrived in the United States, I embraced America. And today I feel America embracing me. And as a result of those multiple extremely well-known and expert physicians and their generosity in the education that provided to me, that led to a collective knowledge that the change will change the way that we do innovation in the future. So it is absolutely a unique journey. But I would say for any students, everyone, and I did many of the innovation devices now. I developed now 2 catheters, both of them approved by the FDA, and some of them also approved in Europe. And when I use that knowledge that I just talked to you about, those catheters, there's a different pathways in FDA, but called 510K pathways. Usually take about 7-10 years to develop. We develop each of them within 3 years from the concept to the approval and use in a human. And we decrease the cost at least by 50%. So no questions, there's a real examples of that science. If you know it very well, and since we standardize it, become very easy to know what test you want to do, how are you going to do it, what is the regulatory requirement about it. So to understand that language, how do you communicate with engineers and physicians and so forth? If you do all that, then definitely you can have a major impact on the life of patients is worldwide. So that's really what we are trying to do.
No, I love that. And I think what's exciting, Dr. Dib, is that today, through the, sort of the magic of the internet, people like you and I are able to connect and sort of amplify this kind of a mission, because I think as the healthcare system, healthcare has become more complicated, not less complicated, in the last 10 or 20 years. And I think that especially with clinicians being demanded to do more with less, it's more important for them to understand, how does this all work? So if you're a clinician and you get a device and you're using it, what's the regulatory pathway for it, the reimbursement, all these things. And so because, so when my father started practicing surgery, you have a good clinical knowledge, you keep up with procedures, you go to your annual society meetings, and you open up business and you're fine. But these days, there's so many things that physicians have to know about to be successful. And I think what the society is doing is really exciting. And by the way, for those who are interested, I just want to make sure I point it out, and we'll put it in the show notes. The website for the society is ISCTR.org. And I want to bring up a graphic from your website that I really liked, that kind of really emphasizes what you guys are doing here, which essentially is most physicians are living here on the far right between practice guidelines, physician adoption, and dealing with the patient. There's, as you've shown here, there's this massive knowledge gap, right? And so essentially this is where the society is focusing on, correct?
That's correct. The society focus on that, and the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association and others focus exactly on where you said, the physician adoption of technology. After the science is done, then how do we apply it on patients? So our education, medical school, or societies now, conferences worldwide, will teach on the diagnosis and the treatment. So for the patients, right? our society, so how basically teaching how to use a product. Our society teach on how you develop a product. So to complement that, so that's now you can see the line is complemented. How you develop product and how to use a product. And of course, if you part of the development of the product, you know much better on how you are going to use the product. So I think every physician should be familiar with both, so they know how to apply therapy very well. And if physician is innovators and wanted to innovate, he definitely need to know that pathway that all my training of until 39 years of age did not give me. So that now they have it. And as you see in this line, starting with the concept, people have a lot of ideas. Currently, in our current knowledge, only 1 out of 3,000 idea will be translated to a product. 1 out of 3,000. And only 10% of startup company will reach the final line. And the rest, literally 90% fall on on that road because of lack of knowledge. They choose the wrong concept because they don't have the right team and understanding to how you test the therapy on the preclinically, and how do you link the preclinical to the clinical, because they were not able to fundraise enough money, so they stop in the middle of the project. They forget to have intellectual property before they publish their data, so they lost the value. An investor doesn't want to do it. They don't know the regulatory pathways, so they underestimate how much the project is going to take and how much money needed. Or they did it in such a way not applicable from the endpoint that they collected, and not reasonable and necessary like what the CMS require. You wanted to change the survival and the quality of life of patient. So if you don't know all that required of the FDA or any regulatory agency outside the United States, the reimbursement and the practice guideline, which is mean you need a science with high evidence and less bias from A to Z. And with that, then science that you can depend on. It's not just gut feeling. And the field, like what you just said, become very complex about 20, 25 years ago, because the era of evidence-based medicine is came, which is mean no longer we agree that, the physician feel that this therapy is good, so we should apply it on patient. And very good example, the aspirin story. Physician felt aspirin kind of prevent heart attack for so many years, until we did the 3 clinical trial and found, the aspirin is harmful for prevention if the patient did not have heart attack and so forth. That's evidence-based medicine. And that's what we also emphasize in those courses on the methods, the design, and the endpoint. So the final outcome of that innovation and testing, very reliable from regulatory point of view, from reimbursement point of view, and also from the practice guideline and physician to adapt it and benefit patient. So that's why we trying to solve that complexity and standardize the method, so people is easy for them to follow.
And I love that, because the thing about it, it's very easy, whether you're a physician or on the industry side, to get sort of immersed in your work. But if we step back and we think about what is the negative outcome if these things aren't taken care of, where physicians are trained on this, because again, when a physician is engaged with an industry partner, it's only more beneficial, and it puts the company in a better success point if they don't have one person who understands this, but they have multiple people, meaning the clinicians, right? Not just the one person they hired on the clinical and regulatory side. If this isn't solved for, the people who end up suffering at the end are patients. Because again, like 1 in 3,000 ideas that make it through, it's not because the other 2,999 were bad ideas. It's because they failed for reasons that could be prevented.
That's very, very important point. What you are saying is very important point. Many of the great idea did not come because lack of knowledge on one steps or the others. And very good example is what medicine now that it changed the life of patients with heart failure called Entresto. Entresto's story was given by Eugene Braunwald, which is the godfather of cardiology. He's approximately now 95 years old, is still lecturing. And he gave great lectures in our society meeting about the development of Entresto and why the Entresto, which is now one of the most beneficial medicine for heart failure, it took 100 years to develop because the concept was there, but people abandoned it for a different reason. Then somebody else came and then they abandoned it for another reason. Those steps that you see on that, on that diagram. But if the knowledge would have been there from day one, and the Entresto has been there, would have saved hundreds of thousands of lives of patients of heart failure worldwide. So your concept is not only, sometimes we drop concept, which is very, very important, but not because the concept is not good, because the lack of knowledge of all the steps after that.
That's amazing. And, I'm wondering also from the society standpoint, when a clinician gets involved with a society, where should they start? Because on your website, you have a lot of great resources. You have ebooks, you have lectures and everything. Where's the best place for a physician to start? Because I think it's just like working out, right?
Right.
So like for me, I'm very much in fitness. If somebody comes to me who hasn't been training and they say, I want to start working out, I don't tell them to do the routine that I do. I tell them just, hey, you know what? Start first by waking up every morning and taking just a walk around your neighborhood, just to start. And then you build from that. So for the society, if a cardiologist comes to you and they start immersing themselves in your education and training, what's the similar thing where it's just like this is the walk around the block? This is how you get started, so that they get into the habit and then build that on those educational blocks.
Yeah, a very important question, right? And the educational material that we designed it in such a way that if somebody completely new, and I believe in early education, the earlier the better. So if you are just a student, medical student or resident in training, which is a new kind of considered, you don't have long practice or something like that, like you can you can take all that program step by step. We design them literally step by step, and the way the course that I put it, starting like what you said on the diagram with the concept, then go to intellectual property, then business plan, then all those things step by step, and then prototyping, preclinical, clinical, regulatory, reimbursement, and practice guidelines. So that's for somebody who's not very familiar with innovation and doesn't know much about it. So like what you said, this is a language, like literally, it's a language that you need to learn. And if you learn that language, then you'll become very efficient in the communication. And you can lead or you can be part of that team of innovative team. And then also the material of somebody, let's say, regulatory person interested only in the regulatory part and not, interested in any other part or knowledgeable in the rest. He can just take that part, the regulatory, and focus on that. The same thing if reimbursement, the same thing is preclinical, the same thing is clinical application and so forth. So those material, you can use them in so many ways. And that's why it's in a digital format and very easy to access and do it at your time. Our students use them as asynchronous. They can take them at any time. Some universities said, okay, you can read in your way. There's a test and there's a quiz in the end that you have to show proficiency, that you read the material, you understood them, and you pass that test like any other test.
And when it comes, and I know that there's a big knowledge gap, all those topics are important, of course. I'm wondering for you, when it comes to medical innovation, of those different areas, from let's say reimbursement to business plans, that whole area that you mentioned, which one do you feel is the area that physicians lack the least amount of knowledge in? They lack the most knowledge in. Like where of all of those is the area that like physicians are really, really poorly educated on?
Statistics. the methods and the statistics. Because if they don't know the statistic is very difficult to understand the value of a product. You really need to know statistic, risk, benefit. And because of that, we have 8 lectures on a statistic designed from the preclinical to the clinical and how you link the science. That's where my epidemiology degree helped me in understanding the statistic. But then I realize now, and that statistic so important, not only for the preclinical, but even today in the clinical practice, our physician does not understand very well the statistic and the interpretation of statistic. Rarely they use it to see rarely they would focus on the magnitude of effect and the magnitude of the side effect and have a balance between them. And how do you apply them in the clinical scenarios, which is usually very broad. Every patient is different, have different diseases, different, very complex scenario. So that's important. And the other one that they know very little is the preclinical. They have no experience on the preclinical testing. Our medical school rarely expose people on the preclinical. Engineer understand material, but they don't understand the preclinical or the clinical. They have no exposure. So we try to put that knowledge together, all of it in one place for all the team that is going to be involved in the innovation. The innovation process is multiple steps, but they are entwined with each other. You have to know your final step to design the first step to succeed to the end. It's a very unique science. You can imagine if you don't understand how the therapy is going to be reimbursed, and you are designing a device that is extremely costly and turn out the benefit very small, which is not necessarily a great idea. Nobody can offer it. So you have to understand everything, all the elements from A to Z. And that's why those steps so intertwined with each other. And any little change in the beginning going to change all the path. If I change a little bit in the device, then that iteration is going to require regulatory input and approvals and a reimbursement and cost and engineering a change and even little thing. And they need to be familiar with that, because now you go to a doctor, tell him, what do you think about this system or this? He will say, well, I would like it to be a little bit different, this way. Instead of try to understand how can, adapt with it. That little change will take years to change and take multi-million dollars. Any concept or idea, extremely expensive and any change. So they need to be familiar with that. Otherwise,
I agree. I'm as I'm listening, I'm just nodding along because, for me, when I was, head of marketing and dealing with product, especially, let's put it this way, certain specialties, they have much stronger personalities than other specialties, in medicine. But, sometimes when we would deal with clinicians and they would ask for certain things, for me, I was very good at handling that, but not every product leader is, where I would think, I'm like, I really wish this physician understood exactly what they're asking for. Cause maybe it's going to make things a little bit more convenient for them, but the amount of money and time it's going to take, it's probably not the best thing to do. And and usually we, as a company, because we're not, we have minimum limited funds, we would have to say we can't do that. And sometimes certain physicians don't understand why. And I think, again, this translational approach of understanding this whole process not only enriches the relationship between physicians and industry, but more importantly, aligns people so that they can achieve the goal, which is, how do we get this product to market in a successful way, drive adoption, and then ultimately improve patient outcomes, improve operational outcomes, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And the innovator himself, when most of the industry use a clinician also, their concept, their input during the development process. If that clinician not familiar, that little iteration is going to have several impact of delaying the therapy for several years and multi-million dollars, then he just can't keep throwing ideas. that it might be actually not good, the other way around. So they need to be familiar in the past, so they to start rethink differently. They have to think differently than what they think today. If they have to change, we would have to change, the way that we do things. Yeah, and currently is completely inefficient and costly.
Yeah, no, I know. I completely agree. I'm wondering, just because of your background in medical innovation, what were some of the devices or technologies that you personally worked on and developed that you're most proud of, and what kind of impact did they have?
Yeah, so I am director of the cardiovascular research, so involved in many of the clinical trial from phase 1, 2, and 3. And we've been involved in many of the therapy that it translated to patients. In the early stages, obviously, the stent, we were part of the investigator for the stent and the drug-eluting stent that changed the way that we do intervention. Patient now also with heart attack, we participate in a clinical trial where we opened the artery with a stent, and that was in the early stages was people felt this is extremely dangerous, but the clinical trial was very well designed. There's a data safety monitoring board for the clinical trial watching every event and the difference between people received the stent versus one did not receive the stent to make sure that we are on the right track. So the stent now changed the way of interventional cardiology. I participate in that. The other device called the filter wire during intervention on patient who has bypass surgery, they have a lot of debris and material in the graft after 10 years. So when we intervene on them, 16% of them will have heart attacks. So the development of the filter wire, I was the trainer in the US on the filter wire and participate in the clinical trials, reduce the heart attack by 50% during those interventions. Benefit patients significantly. The other one, the appendage closure device, the Watchman device now to replace anticoagulation. There's inpatient
Scientific.
Watson Scientific also participated in that. We started and the final trial that get the approval was the that get the approval for the Watchman devices started in 2008. We were part of that, and now this current therapy used everywhere. I supervised the development of a system called orbital atherectomy. Worked 9 years on that with the company called Cardiovascular System to cut the calcium in the artery and allow for stent development, and the technology acquired by Abbott recently. So we work with many technology because I was involved in many of the clinical trials, over 100 clinical trials, and many of them were translated to real benefits, many in the device, many in the drug. The Entresto was, I mentioned, one of those drugs, but many others now. What's going to be, I think, we mentioned that the world of medicine very complex and demanding, and I think artificial intelligence will be very helpful for medicine. Would not replace the job, but what would do will eliminate will reduce the routine work for the physician, so the physician can focus on that kind of science that you and I we talk about. Literally, every physician can be inventors.
I agree.
Of the scientists' belief that the life experience and exposure will provide the raw material to the brain. And when the brain encounter a problem, start connecting the dots from the experience and find the solution. So if you have 5 people in the room and you present one problem to them, each one of them will provide a different solution according to their experience. See, Steve Jobs himself said innovation is just connecting the dots.
I completely agree.
And complex, and so everyone will be, and so the physician can really focus on what's important instead of exhausted with the routine. reading EKG, for example, in cardiology, or reading X-rays, or reading, echoes all day long, become routine. If you have artificial intelligence helping them in that, they can go to become innovators, understand innovation, and bring the therapy to patient is earlier. That this process is complex. The ideas is easy part. Jeff Bezos said that ideas are the easy part. Execution is everything. And the execution of that idea, translating that idea to a medical product that make a difference for patient, to become a useful product for patient, is a complex process. But then they can focus on that in addition to the diagnosis and treatment of disease, and having the artificial intelligence help them in the routine, daily, repetitive activity that they get bored of. Their life will be exciting. Patient will be much more, happier life and better survival. And that's, I think, artificial intelligence, how can play important role in medicine. We have done several webinar on that. Also, we are focusing our society focusing on artificial intelligence, and we did already 2 webinars. They are on our webpage on ISCTR.org.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, even me in running my business, there's a lot of like standard operating procedures and documents that we have to put together. And in the past, like I would have to, myself or somebody from my team would have to write these up. Those can be done literally within a minute now because we use ChatGPT all the time. And I think that if you talk, I've had a, somewhat of a long career in medicine, definitely not as long as you, but long enough where I've met hundreds of physicians, maybe thousands now. I don't think I've met a single physician who disliked the practice of medicine or dealing with patients. All physicians, what they hate is the administrative and operations side of medicine, which a lot of that essentially can be streamlined using AI. I'm wondering also on the innovation side, and if what ISCTR has seen on this side in terms of the applications of AI on the clinical side in terms of improving, let's say, visualization, imaging, and targeting. How do you guys think about AI in the clinical applications?
Oh, absolutely. We are putting a whole symposium now with the TCT this year to specifically on the clinical application. So we'll be talking about the AI application in EKG reading and detecting certain arrhythmias, such as atrial fibrillation and so forth. We're talking about also AI using in the cath lab to quantitate the amount of narrowing and stenosis. AI used for choosing the right patient for the TAVR, for the valve. Before, during, and after the development. So the clinical application is going to be there. We better be prepared, and we can, with the AI now, I think is the right time to change our educational system and make us continuous from the concept to the clinical application to patient. And having AI helping them doing the routine things to reduce that burden. So I think we can use it effectively in our daily practice. And also in hospitals, AI can check who's on the right medicine, what medicine missing, the interaction between medicine and others. And I think another very important role, even in a very good society with a good educational system in medicine, you see a huge variation between physicians. Skills and ability and knowledge, and AI, I think, will make it almost equal between superb doctors and doctor who does not follow necessarily as aggressively as it should be, and the treatment will be almost as good for every patient. And is because we know that there's a huge difference between even states and between cities and urban area and rural areas and so forth. But if you have a system that alerting the physician in rural areas versus somebody in academic institution who's professor and teaching every day about it, they become almost equal in terms of the impact on patient.
Absolutely.
So that has become an important area also for AI to address.
As we kind of wrap things up, and again, I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us. We definitely want to have you back. I want to make sure that the physicians who are listening, they're able to catch ISCTR in person, because I think, it's great that there's access to all this education online on your website. Again, that's isctr.org, that you can check it out. But what upcoming events can clinicians meet you and, check out the society? I know you guys have some conferences coming up.
Yeah, in TCT, a transcatheter therapeutic, large interventional cardiology, one of the largest interventional cardiology in the world, this year in Washington, D.C. So everybody familiar with it is TCT. So we'll have TCT ISCTR seminar. We have one on artificial intelligence and the application in medicine. And the second one will be on innovation process. And they can meet us and meet many of our scientists and the speakers. And definitely would love to have that network and increase our network. So those people who are interested, they will be part of this task force and mission.
Fantastic. And, in terms of industry sponsors, do you guys, because we have a lot of people in the industry who listen, are you guys seeking any more partnerships or sponsorships from industry, or what does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Our mission is to provide education to many students in many universities as much as we can. And the universities enable many of them, do not have a large budget for their students and so forth. So we would love to have a sponsorship from industry and use it to expand that education to almost every university in the U.S. and many outside the U.S. So to enhance that process of innovation and bring therapy earlier, as we said, to patient and reducing the cost. And obviously, many of people who are listening, like what you said, you mentioned isctr.org, our webpage, or they can also find us on LinkedIn, the International Society for Cardiovascular Translational Research on LinkedIn also.
One thing I wanted to ask before we wrap things up is that with ISCTR, you guys have attracted some really big names and heavyweight people to be involved in the mission. Who are some of the people that sit on the board and the advisory board with you?
Yeah, obviously, for our mission to be complete and we have the right resources for the education, the governing board consists of people who's very well known worldwide in education, such as Dr. Spencer King, Anthony DiMaria. So Spencer King, Emeritus Professor in Emory University, Anthony DiMaria, Professor in UCSD. We have David Holm, a Professor in Mayo Clinic, and so forth. And we have Bob Bono, who was President of American Heart Associations. We have also other members who were the President of the American College of Cardiology, so they are very well known in education. We have another segment is for industry leaders who very involved heavily in industry, such as Stan Rowe, who was the developer in the business side for the valve, for the catheter and valve. We have Todd Branton, Chief Scientific Officer of Edward. We have Ken from the Global Director of Kelton Stein, the Global Director of Boston Scientific. So as you see that we have from regulatory side, and we thank his support, Bram Zuckerman, the Director of the FDA for devices, and he literally put every deputy director from the FDA to write and participate in the lectures of that online course. From the CMS, the former Director of Coverage and Analysis, Louis Jack. From the guidelines, we have Spencer King and Bob Bono, and we have Blaise Carabello. So every segment is covered by experts in that field. And that's what's really the difference in that educational program. Many people have educational program of innovation. Our educational program differentiate by 2 points. Number one, the caliber of people who are participated in the lectures and the writing of that ebook, who are the right expert. That's number one. Number two, we develop a whole cardiovascular device online course that really does not exist anywhere in the world. For any product development for devices, could be a stent, could be a bandage closure, coronary, heart failure, and so forth. So that's that kind of expertise and level is provide a unique, superb education that we felt is very important, and that's how we build the society.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I just want to kind of pull it up because I looked at this beforehand, but for our listeners, they can go check this out. And I'm just going over to your website. If you look under the About section and go to first of all, the governing board, and you scroll through, it's just a who's who of people in the cardiovascular world. And then on top of that, I was really impressed with your scientific advisory board. Your scientific advisory board is just stacked with a lot of really impressive and talented people. Some of these names, I'm not as familiar in the cardiovascular space, but I'm familiar enough where I did recognize some of these names. And so it's really just a fantastic group of people. I'm really impressed with it. And so I want to encourage our listeners. So for aside from visiting the website, upcoming conferences you guys have, you guys have something at TCT going on. You also have something at CRT. Any other conferences that they can keep an eye out to try and seek you out and engage with the society?
Sorry, you get intermittent for.
Oh yeah. No, I was saying, what other aside from TCT and CRT, what other conferences do you guys appear at so that people can find you?
Also in the European Society of Cardiology in London this year, we have a special session on the application of clinical research and clinical practice, that will be held together between the European Society of Cardiology and our society.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Dr. Dib, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate what you're doing. Our society, it moves forward and is in a much better place because of people like you and your ability to bring other innovators together to sort of solve these problems. Because unfortunately, we can't rely on a lot of our current educational systems and government and everything. It takes, I'm a big believer that what moves society forward is like entrepreneurs and innovators. So I'm really grateful for you, and I'm grateful for the friendship now as well.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. So to our listeners, please be sure, go on LinkedIn. I want you to do a couple things. Number one, go visit ISCTR on LinkedIn, give them a follow. Dr. Nabil Dib is also on LinkedIn. Give him a follow and go check out their website, ISCTR.org, for the industry partners. Go sponsor this. I know you guys have a lot of marketing budget that you can spend. Don't spend the marketing budget, as I say, on worthless, meaningless activities and things. Go sponsor education like this, because then you'll see not only the most impact that your organization can have, but more importantly, a great partnership. And potentially, you might be able to find some great early adopters and innovative physicians who can help you. So be sure to go check them out at ISCTR.org. I'm your host, Omar Khatib. This is another episode of the State of MedTech. Be sure to subscribe and follow, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks for checking out this episode. If you want to do me a big favor and join so many other people who have helped grow this podcast, take a second and look below. If you're on Apple, give us 5 stars and write a short review. If you're on Spotify, just give us 5 stars. And if you're on YouTube, hit the like button. And most importantly, if you can, subscribe. We release so many different episodes that you may miss. Be sure to subscribe and turn your notifications on. You get extra points with me if you subscribe across all 3 channels. Thank you so much. And if you felt like this episode helped you, send this to somebody who'd really enjoy and appreciate it. Share and spread the love. We'll see you all next time.